Good evening, members. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start with tonight's meeting. So, firstly, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first Community Scrutiny Committee meeting of the new municipal year of 23-24. I'd like to welcome new members to the committee and also to the council. Before I begin, my Vice Chairman this evening, Jodie Lucas, is unable to attend, and I've asked Councillor Rose Brooks to substitute in for her. Do I have any objection from the committee? No? Thank you very much. So, moving forward with the agenda, first item is the webcasting introduction. The Chairman will read the following announcement. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Therefore, by entering the council chamber and using the seating area, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. Members, my name is Councillor Annika Patel and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. To my left I have Jen Gould, who is our Chief Operating Officer. To her left I've got Andrew Small, who is our Strategic Director, and to his left I've got Georgina Blakemore, who is our Chief Exec. And to my right, as I've introduced already, I've got Councillor Rose Brooks as my Vice Chairman, and to her left I've got Vivian Messenger as Democratic Services Officer. Vivian, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillors Lucas and Caroline Pond.
Thank you. And do we have any substitute members?
Yes, I've got Councillor Parsons substituting for Councillor Lucas and Councillor Wixley substituting for Councillor Caroline Pond.
Okay, I note that there's still 4 members who haven't arrived as yet. Do we have any apologies for lateness?
None, Chairman.
Any from the committee? Councillor Wixley?
Yeah, Chairman, it's not a point as regards absences. I'd just like to say that I've got IT problems yet again, so I can't actually get the agenda at the moment. So it's a bit unfortunate because there were some points I wanted to raise, but I can't do that now. So I'll do my best to follow the meeting and take part in it.
Okay.
Awesome. Comes to the rescue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kane. Okay, so Councillor Mark, can you switch your microphone on, please?
Sorry, Councillor Yerrill has messaged to send his apologies.
Okay, thank you. So the fourth item on the agenda this evening is declarations of interest. Do we have any interest to declare this evening? No? Okay. Item number 5 is notes of the previous meetings, which is listed on pages 5 to 8. I wasn't at that meeting on the 21st of March and on the 4th of April. So members of that committee, do you have any points to raise, Councillor Murray?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think there's something missing, and it can either go on page 7 or page 8, but I would have thought there's room on page 7. I remember quite explicitly that the committee agreed with my suggestion that we minuted our thanks for the outstanding chairmanship of Councillor Lee for that year. And I think I would be saying this anyway, but I think it's even more important that it is in the minutes because A, that's what we've done, and B, for whatever reasons, he's no longer chairman. So I did suggest that on the 21st and the committee went along with it. So if we could add to the minutes, please, our thanks to Councillor Lee for her chairing of the committee last year.
That's absolutely fine. I'm happy to add them to the minutes. Members, are we in agreement?
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the terms of reference and work programmes as listed on pages 9 to 12. Do we have any comments from members? Councillor Wixley?
Yeah, I think I did have, Chairman, but I'll try and get back to that, if I may, when I've sorted out my IT problems.
No problem at all. I actually had a few points that I wish to raise under this item. You'll see on page 10 we've got a draft proposed portfolio responsibilities, and we've got a list of the different service areas that fall underneath the different portfolio areas. And what I think would be useful, particularly as we've got a number of new members to the committee and also to the council, it might be useful to have either a written brief or a presentation from the service leads on what the council does under these headings, so that we understand who the responsible officers are, whether there's any budgetary allowance, etc. How do the members feel on that? Yeah. Would you like that via a written form or via a verbal presentation? Written form? That's fine. Sorry, Councillor Helen Kane.
Thank you. On page 11, you have your work programme. I would like to actually emphasise the fact that you have included housing allocation scheme, which is something that I picked up, and it is to my interest actually, and spoken with the officers in depth, because I think that needs to be really properly scrutinised and analysed and debated by the members. Personally, I seem to have a lot of problems with the existing policy, so I'm very pleased to see it, you know, being in your programme.
Thank you very much. And actually, on that note, I wanted to make a further suggestion this evening, that where we have items that are listed on the work programme, and we're going to be receiving substantial reports, I think it'd be useful to have a steer from the committee in what it is that they actually want to be seeing from these reports moving forward, so that that detail can come out in the report when it's presented to us in the meeting. Obviously, looking at the date of 26th of September, in order for that to happen, either we can have written representation from councillors, or we could have a virtual briefing whereby questions could be suggested ahead of that meeting on the 26th. How does that sound? Yeah. So potentially looking at week commencing the 11th of September, but we'll be in touch with a date on that. I think the essence of that pre-scrutiny is really important to understand what it is that members want to see when these reports come forward. Councillor Kane?
Sorry, I'm not a member of this committee, but would you accept notes and comments from other councillors?
Absolutely. In fact, it's probably an idea to have that suggestion made through the members' bulletin if members want to bring forward any questions. Councillor Murray?
Yes, I might be having IT problems, but we're at the moment we're on terms of reference and work programme, aren't we?
That's correct.
Maybe I haven't looked at something that I just need to click on. Okay, so we have got, yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at page 11 and page 12. I was looking at the first thing we clicked on. Taking the point you've just made, surely, unless I've misunderstood what you've said, surely the best way is for us at this meeting, for members to be able to say, I mean, maybe they can't do it now because we were just thinking about it, but, you know, surely it should be at this meeting, for example, going forward, that we can see what items are coming up on the 26th, and members at this meeting could be saying, well, we particularly want the report, or can the report please make sure it includes this focus as well. Obviously the officers will know what they need to bring to us and what legally has to come to us, but I would have thought it was at this meeting, the 27th of June, we should be saying, well, on these items on the 26th, we particularly want this focus. Otherwise I can't see how it works in terms of publication deadlines for the agenda and that kind of thing. So I think you've made a fair point, but I think it comes at the previous meeting.
I'm happy to have that discussion at this meeting, but what I felt was that because we do have a number of new members to the committee, I thought it'd be useful first to have an explanation of what different service areas are, so that they have a better understanding of what constitutes under each of the different service areas. And I was intending to hold a briefing ahead of that meeting, whereby an explanation is given as to what's likely to come forward and what other questions that members may have. And that's why I suggested the week commencing the 11th.
Yeah, your first point about a general briefing about issues for new members around the focus of this committee is absolutely right. But I thought you then made a second point about reports coming at particular meetings, and we need, I would have thought, in the cycle of meetings, I don't want to labour this too much, but I would have thought in terms of the cycle of meetings and the preparation of agendas, we need to, at each prior meeting, look at the 3 items, there's 3 items on this occasion, and be able to say, well, we want this focus included as well. But it doesn't preclude your first idea, which I think is excellent.
And again, I completely agree, but I think because this is the first meeting of the municipal year, I've sort of thrown this on members so they may not be prepared to ask or to know what questions to raise regarding those items when they do come up. So I thought I'd give a bit of time, because we do have a bit of time ahead of that. Councillor Wixley.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've caught up now. Yeah, I do have a question on page 10. I think we're on this item anyway. At the top of the page, the Housing Strategic Health Partnerships, just below that, there's reference to Housing and Property Service as follows, it says. And it's housing management, housing options, and then my query is when it says older people's housing. I just wondered what that encompassed, because I'm aware that we used to refer to some older people's accommodation as sheltered accommodation, but I understand that has now been changed to independent living. So I just wanted some clarity on what sort of range of living options there were for older people.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. Councillor Whitbread, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And that would include independent living. You're quite right, Councillor Wixley. And also I think the wider conversations that we have with our older tenants about moving into independent living or more appropriate accommodation, as well as our relationship with the County Council and social care. Thank you.
Thank you. And hence my suggestion earlier about giving detail about what each of those different service areas constitute. Councillor Sharif.
Just a quick question on car parking, staying on page 10. I have a lot of constituents that complain about the bays along the high street, that they're not big enough. Cars are being knocked. The disabled bays, there's several there. Drivers can't get in and out of their cars. Is there a report or something that we can have, or we have, that we can look at how the sizing is established?
I think the relevant. If you're to put forward an email to myself, I can forward it on to the relevant officer for him to provide an explanation to Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm looking at my notebook now, because I normally make notes on the agenda, but I don't have the skills to make notes on an iPad. There was something I wanted to bring on item 6. The last 2 items that haven't been allocated to a meeting, which is on page 12. I fully accept that different councillors will have different commitments, and therefore I'm not asking for any special treatment, but I do just want to highlight that if item 11 and 12 did go to the 5th of March, that would be very difficult for any of the Loughton members to attend that meeting, because it's a really bad clash. We all happen to be parish council members as well, and it's our annual meeting with parishioners, which we have to hold by law. And it would be a really difficult clash, and those are 2 important items. So if everything else being equal, if it was at all possible not to take those 2 items on the 5th of March, I think Councillor Pond, Councillor Brooks and myself would be grateful, because I think we all 3 would feel that we would have to attend the annual meeting with parishioners in Loughton. But I know other factors will decide it, but it's just an early plea if at all possible, for it not to go to the 5th of March.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I think the intention is to have a second meeting in March, at the end of March, to receive both presentations. Okay, so if we've got no further comments, then we'll move on to item number 7, which is the resident involvement strategy, as listed on pages 13 to 18. I'm glad this evening we've got Mr. Chris Walsh, who's the service manager, and Sergit Balu to take us through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of points of reference before I go into sort of the headlines of the resident involvement strategy. The first being on paragraph 16, which refers to our corporate plan 2018 to 2023. This will be changed to reflect the new corporate plan of 2023 to 2027. And paragraph 31, there is an error there where the table refers to percentage of respondents, which should actually refer to number of respondents. So this, in actual fact, doesn't change any of the statistical stuff that we receive from SurveyMonkey or the handwritten surveys that we received. So just to go into a little bit of the background of the new resident involvement strategy, the council offers a variety of opportunities for involvement across the business and across our organisation. However, the aim of this particular draft resident involvement strategy is to set out our new approach for property and housing services towards resident involvement. And we will be looking at how this can be delivered, supported and resourced. Whilst developed to ensure compliance with the current and future regulatory requirements of the social housing providers, its primary focus is to recognise the positive roles our residents play in design and improvement of our property and housing service, while supporting our wider commitment towards the empowerment of residents and our communities. The draft resident involvement strategy provides a new framework for residents to get involved. It recognises that there is no one-size-fits-all. It sets out a wide range of engagement opportunities for residents to get involved, as much as little as they may wish, based on their interests, time available, and the preferred method of communication. Meaningful resident involvement is viewed as a key part of delivering sustainable communities and helping to improve the quality of life for our residents. Moving on to the framework, the regulator of social housing has put forward to promote basically viable, efficient and well-governed social housing sector. This is based off of a couple of different things, but what obviously drives this particular one is the tenant involvement and empowerment consumer standard of 2017, which sets expectations for registered social landlords and providers, providing what information and communication we put to the residents and the diverse needs of our tenants throughout the district. To have a clear approach to complaints and provide a wide range of opportunities for tenants to have influence and be involved. In 2020, the government published its white paper, the Charter for Social Housing Residents, setting out to raise the standard of social housing and meet the aspirations of residents throughout the country, both today and in the future. The Charter covered 7 key themes. Number 1 being to be safe in your home. Number 2, to know how your landlord is performing. 3, to have your complaint dealt with promptly and fairly, to be treated with respect, to have your voice heard by your landlord, which is predominantly where this strategy comes in, and lastly, to have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in. We move on to engagement. During the period from October 2020 to September 2021, officers with colleagues across the service and with residents met with residents to understand what good involvement looks like, to identify opportunities for involvement and further our understanding of how EFDC residents prefer to be involved. Officers joined a best practice network in group, including and adding relevant conferences to their needs, taking time to understand best practice within the sector. Interested residents volunteered to join a residents' involvement co-creation group to help shape the new model of resident involvement, which better meets the needs and wants of customers and the business, as well as fulfilling the current regulatory requirements. Alongside this, a combination of digital and in-person involvement opportunities were piloted to help inform our future approach. Our vision. Our vision for property and housing services is to create great places where people want to live. In order to do this, we must listen to our residents and what they want. We've asked our co-create group of involved residents to tell us what good resident involvement looks like, and we've adapted these principles in the development of this resident involvement strategy. Our aims are to improve communication, ensure that residents have open lines of communication for us however they wish to do that. So whether that be in person, whether that be telephone or electronically, we want to make sure that we're not shutting down any avenues for residents. Making engagement easier. So we've looked at stuff like our, in any given week between our property services and housing services, we'll go out and do hundreds of visits. It's making that engagement count, so where residents will go out and meet members of staff, that they're well aware of what we offer in terms of engagement for resident involvement. Empowering and holding the landlord to account. A large proportion of this will come in the new tenant satisfaction measures that have come through from the government and the expectations around that. With an independent survey done for us to ensure that we and our satisfaction levels are where they need to be. Working with our communities. This is something that we take much pride in, to try and make sure that we work with the people within our communities from all the different backgrounds and ethnicities. To work with people and to show that the hard work comes off. More recently at Ninefields, where we had a great opening of the new play area there with 150 people attending. Those are the kind of events that make us really proud. And lastly is to put the customer at the heart of what we do. Lastly, the new framework for resident involvement includes different tiers. I won't go through all the colours because there's quite a few of them, but we've got stronger communities and select committee, the tenant and leaseholder panel, which I've been part of recently and can tell you that it's been really helpful, and the feedback that we receive it really does shape what we do. Fire and building safety panels, scrutiny panels, focus groups, the sheltered housing forums, recruitment champions, estate champions and estate walkabouts, chatterbox live sessions, residents associations and residents groups, community events, all the way down to handbooks, biannual newsletters, and making sure that our complaints information is available on all documents that we send out. So at this point, I will hand it over to members if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. Councillor Murray?
Yes, Chairman, I've got a number of points and questions, and again, we're going to have to be flicking around different documents, so be patient with me, because I don't find it as easy as a paper document. Sorry that I keep on saying that, but that's just the reality. Right, page 13, I was very pleased to recognise that one size doesn't fit all, because we've got very different estates, very different areas that we manage. So I think the approach of one size fits all is absolutely, the wrong approach, and we're saying that we recognise that, so that was good. I do have my first question based on page 13. Paragraph 2. The success of the strategy depends on the service developing a culture where resident involvement is viewed as a valued activity, because you can have all these mechanisms, but if officers don't recognise resident involvement is valuable, it's words. You say that this is embedded across all functions of the service. Are you saying that you feel that that's embedded already across the service, or are you saying that there are steps you're taking to make sure that that attitude is embedded across the whole service? So how far would you say it's embedded at the moment, and what steps are being taken to make sure that culture is further embedded? So that's my first question.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of how we will look to embed that with staff across the organisation. It's something that, within housing, it's something that we've always taken very seriously. The housing officers or tenancy and estate officers, as they are now, have always been part and parcel of residents group, evening meetings, etc. This is something that within housing has been embedded. There's always work to do, I feel, across the organisation with that, and it'll always be making sure that we're having learning opportunities for individual departments or individual directorates to ensure that they're part of that. Luckily for us, we have a great health and wellbeing team as well who link in quite well to us with any of the projects that we do. So we do reach across the organisation in terms of that. But as I said, there's always going to be work to do on that, and I think there's always going to be room for improvement.
You want me to carry on, Chairman? Yep.
How many questions do you have?
Well, there's 3 other areas I want to explore, so how many questions they generate, I'm not absolutely sure.
Can I just check with Mr. Walsh? Is that the end of your presentation? Are you going to go into... That's it? Please carry on then.
Okay, so it's still the first attachment on the agenda. Page 26. Obviously, my eyes went to these nice coloured boxes, but I did read it carefully. The yellow box, tenant and leaseholder panel, and I'm sure it's tucked away somewhere, but I couldn't find it. It says panels in the yellow tier act as a consultative and decision-making body. So could you give us some example of the kind of decision-making the tenant and leaseholder panel as a panel? I know there's scrutiny panel and complaints panel, but they're a little bit separate, and I'm going to explore them later. Could you give me an example of, or members an example of the decisions that you think tenant and leaseholder panel might be making in what kind of areas?
Yep, thank you, Councillor Murray. So in relation to that, some of the more recent panels have helped us make final decisions on the wording around our damp leaflet that went out to all residents, the asbestos policy that was recently put together. They had some information and feedback on that. And this strategy itself, resident involvement strategy, they've had a large amount of involvement in terms of helping us structure that and put that together. Around, for instance, the stuff like the leaflets around asbestos and damp, it's been really helpful having the guys there to be able to give us a steer on what that looks like, because as residents of this district, we want the information we send out to be as clear as possible, so their feedback and help on those particular projects have been really well received.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Murray, just very quickly, I was just about to say it's a shame that when Marshall's not here, because he's actually the chairman of that forum, and he could have perhaps added to your response.
And I might add, Chairman, because you wouldn't know this, because you haven't been a member before, he never misses, so there will be a very good reason why he's not here. His level of involvement, and I know the housing portfolio holder will agree, his level of involvement in this select committee is always very good. He's nearly always here and always got something to say. I think my next comments are based around Appendix 2, the glossary of opportunities. So if members click on that, and it's page 38. Yeah. Okay, the scrutiny panel new, complaint scrutiny panel new, and those are to be welcomed. And I fully accept that the emphasis must be on tenant and leaseholder involvement in those. But I just wondered whether there was going to be any member involvement at all in those panels. And even if there isn't, what's going to be the report back mechanism to members? Because I would have thought the scrutiny panel, looking at detailed issues that they feel are important, and particularly looking at the complaints, the scrutiny panel may well generate information that would be very interesting to members. So I wondered, so there's 2 questions there really. Is there going to be any member involvement at all in those bodies? So I do accept you don't want to swamp that. And what would be the report back mechanism to members on issues and findings arising from those 2 panels? And then I think it's just one more point then, Chairman.
So yeah, in relation to that, at the minute, there hasn't been any plans to have members on those particular groups. Certainly doesn't mean that we may not involve that in the future, but at the moment, obviously, we wanted to concentrate on the residents and leaseholders of the district to ensure that they had their say without any sort of maybe additional pressure. The feedback mechanism for those, when we go forward and when we take a sample of complaints, for instance, and we look at those, again, obviously we'll try and make sure that we're not breaching any sort of data protection, but we'll be taking that information forward to make sure that the residents are able to see how we've responded, why we've made the decisions that we've made as officers or managers in the organisation, and make sure that those are fair decisions that we're making based off real information. So certainly anything from those groups that comes back, we would certainly like to feed back into members. However that looks moving forward is yet to be decided.
Councillor Murray, just on that
Yep.
point, by way of a recommendation that we can bring forward, perhaps we could ask for bi-monthly reporting from this, from the resident involvement panels, particularly looking around the complaints that are generated and how they're resolved.
I don't think that's a bad idea at all, Chair.
Members happy to add that as a recommendation? Yep.
Just one thing arising from that, and then my final point. But I have read this really carefully, and I hope members think the questions I'm asking are legitimate. It's bound to raise questions. An important report like that. I certainly don't want to. I fully take the point that when these are set up, you've got to train residents. You've got to train, and they have got to be given the involvement. And too much member involvement will work against that. So I'm all in favour of that. But I do think going forward there may be occasions. For example, if there was a scrutiny panel investigation on issues around one estate, I would have thought it would be very beneficial for the panel to be asked to consider whether they want the local member to be involved in that scrutiny. I would have thought that would be to everyone's benefit. But let's see how it works out, and going forward, as you've said, Mr. Walsh, it might develop into limited member involvement. The emphasis must be tenants and leaseholders. And my final point, Chairman, is just a very general point. Somewhere here, and I can't pretend I remember which appendix it was on or which part of the report, and I'm not going to waste time flicking through. We had a list of the groups that exist. That isn't as large as it used to be. So the one that I was involved in setting up 20 years ago, I think, must have been longer than that actually, because the Oakwood Hill estate hasn't been in road and walled since the last boundary review, which I think was about 2000. So certainly involved in setting it up in the late 80s or 1990s was O'Hara. And that area, for example, and I'm sure there's other areas, cries out for a residents group and tenants group. And I wondered if there were any plans to kind of help initiate the setting up of either defunct groups or new groups that have never existed before.
So, yes, certainly the groups that we have in place, they are obviously asked to try and make sure that they're sort of self-sufficient, though we will be ensuring that there's support for those groups throughout their sort of involvement with EFDC. We obviously made sure to try and support them from a financial point of view as well, and giving them their funding each year. And again, in terms of obviously starting new groups up, that is one of the main drivers of this particular strategy, is that we want to get more groups, we want there to be more involvement, and that not be from the same areas that it's been previously. Though we greatly value the people that are involved currently, we certainly would like to add a little bit more new blood, if you like, to the tenant panels and whatnot. So we want to make sure that we're supporting that, and certainly that would be one of our drivers, is to ensure more groups moving forward.
Arising from that, Chairman, I completely agree that once they're set up, they need to be self-driven and that's probably why O'Hara isn't there anymore, because it was self-driven for quite a few years. But we're going to need an officer that's clearly got as part of their job description setting these up and driving these. We used to, Mr Clifton and Mr Jones. I mean, I am talking a few years ago. These are names that probably not everyone knows. So have we actually got someone within housing services that has got that as a clear part of their job description? Because they're not going to just happen if there isn't someone from EFDC initially driving them and giving them, I don't know, 3 or 4 months support. With the best will in the world, they're not going to happen otherwise, I don't think. So have we got an officer with a clear, a clear description in that as part of their job description?
Yeah, so we do. We have 2 officers over 2 separate sort of types of the team. So we have one within our development programme, a lady called Leanne. She's helps with our new developments, but also crosses over onto our tenancy engagement side within housing, and also Lorraine Gibson, who has got quite a wealth of experience in this side of stuff. She's come back in recently to help me with a lot of these projects, and that's been greatly received by sort of existing members who know her from old. So that's been really helpful, and yeah, that will continue for the foreseeable.
Thank you for Councillor Moore. I believe that Mr Ballew wanted to come back on one of the points raised as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Murray's queries, the associations are listed under paragraph 23, so you're right, yes, those 5 key organisations are listed there. Just with regards to member sort of involvement, the terms of reference for those groups are due for reviewing later this year. So I think that would be an ideal point at which to raise member sort of involvement and how that interaction works. And then I think a broader piece, just linking back to the point you made about embedding the approach across the organisation. So we're just in the process of launching our tenant satisfaction measures. That's a new survey that will replace the STAR survey. That's something that you may be familiar with. And as part of that, and our communication strategy, that will help embed the approach towards good, solid customer service engagement across the whole organisation, because the new measures actually go across the whole organisation in terms of assets, repairs, customer satisfaction, neighbourhoods, place. So there's a really broad remit in that space. And then probably one last point I'll probably just take the opportunity to mention. With regards to one of the appendices, you'll notice that some of our responses to the surveys were quite low from residents. And I mean, 2 parts to that. One, that was a little bit disappointing because we would hope to get much more engagement. And Chris referred to an event that we had where there was over 150 people there. So I think one of the things that we'll look at is how do we attract more residents into this space. The framework approach that we've got in terms of light touch, right through to being really engaged at almost like a governance level, which will give residents much wider reach into the organisation again. So that will give residents opportunities to either engage very lightly or in great detail. So that should also increase the level of sort of engagement that we have, and also diversify the sort of groups and the numbers of people that we have approaching us as well. So there's like a multi-tiered approach to that, the strategy is the start point for us. That's setting our stall out. The work then begins once that's adopted, is ratified. There will no doubt be some fine tuning, and then we can come back a year later and sort of detail to committee how that strategy has gone in year 1. And I think that would be really good to do as a recommendation, perhaps, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Ballew. I think it's really important that the strategy is reviewed regularly so that we can stay on top of it and improve upon our resident engagement. Councillor McCann.
So just 2 questions, please. So I think just drawing up on what you just said, the title of this document is Draft Resident Involvement Strategy, including Action Plan. It doesn't include an action plan in Appendix 3. Is the action plan to be done once this is ratified, or did I just miss it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So first of all, it's outlining the plan of action in a sense. Really, this is going to be our approach, yes. We would certainly look to develop, as those scrutiny groups and the resident groups start working more with us, we will develop that action plan going forward. So the first point, yes, we need to develop that action plan in some greater detail.
Councillor McCann.
Grace, no, thank you. It's just that obviously the doing bit wasn't necessarily there in terms of tangible, outputs, outcomes, numbers of surveys, numbers of engagements over a set period of time and time bound, etc. And I suppose linked to that, page 31, you've got risk management. So the only risk that's been identified so far is almost a risk of delivery versus non-delivery. So will there be a further risk register of risks that are linked to the delivery of the action plan that will sit alongside the action plan? Because at the moment, almost the risk is conceptualised almost delivery versus non-delivery. It seems to be quite narrow.
Sorry, your microphone, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that is, again, a good point. I'm certainly happy to revisit the risk register on that. If there are additional risks that are identified through the work that we have, through the panel work that we have, or if there are risks that members are sort of willing to share as well, we can incorporate those and take a risk-based approach to that, for sure, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Wixley, I believe you've indicated to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I've got two actually questions, I think, basically. But one is, has already been mentioned previously, which is paragraph 23 on page 17. And there's a reference there to currently 5 active recognised residents-led associations. I believe there used to be 7. I know that one of those, which no longer exists, is a Debden Tenants Panel meetings, because I used to attend those. Councillors are invited to attend them at both district and town level. And I know why that one actually packed up in unfortunate circumstances, because things got a bit unruly, but it did spoil it for those people who did enjoy those meetings. So I've often asked if there are any attempts to resurrect the Debden Tenants Panel meeting, or Loughton might have a different name, because Loughton isn't represented here at all. So I'd be interested in if there's any progress on that, or what the current situation is. I'd also be curious to know which the other resident association folded, which one that was, because my understanding that there were 7 at one time. And I've got another question after that, but perhaps I'd leave you to answer those questions.
Microphone, please.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. So one of the remits that Lorraine has been given as part of this involvement, and obviously coming back into the role, has been to look at resurrecting some of the groups that have kind of gone by the wayside, so Debden being one of them. We're kind of tapping into Lorraine's kind of extensive kind of back catalogue, if you like, of contacts of people that she's been involved with previously. So that's something we're doing. The other one was over in Ninefields in Waltham Abbey. And again, we've recently reached out to the group there, and we're now trying to put that back together as well. So we are actively trying to kind of rekindle the groups that have kind of gone by the wayside. And it's something that we know is important. We want to bring those numbers up. So first and foremost, that's one of the remits that Lorraine's been given.
If I can come back on my second point. This is part of the document which says it's the Resident Involvement Strategy 2022 to 2027, which starts on page 50. My question is, or comment really, was on actually the top of page 61, if I can get there on this fairly quickly. The top of page 61, it follows on from bullet points on page 60. But at the very top there, there's reference to subject social landlords to Ofsted-style inspections. I was a bit concerned about the reference to Ofsted, given the recent sad case of the headmistress who allegedly committed suicide after an Ofsted-style, or an Ofsted inspection, not a style. And I just wonder if that was the sort of right terminology to use, and if perhaps that bullet point could be rephrased in a suitable way without the reference to Ofsted.
Mr. Bally.
Thank you, Councillor Wixley. That actually was a reference that the regulator for social housing originally posted or proposed, whereby the regulator was proposing to rank organisations and then also then develop a regime of inspections. So the style and approach is very similar to that of Ofsted. However, happy to revise that and certainly note the comments that you've made. There have been some changes in the regulator's position over the last 12 months or so. So it looks like they won't be publishing a list of organisations in terms of ranked orders or ranked league tables, as you might say. However, there will be an inspection regime that will commence as of 2024 into 25. So that type of inspection regime will be in place, but certainly happy to rephrase the commentary within the strategy document. Thank you.
Councillor Wixley, you wanted to come back?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my only point about that is that I think we've probably all got a broad view of what an Ofsted inspection is, but probably most people, and myself included, won't have a detailed knowledge of that. So I think it's leading on to people to perhaps get knowledge which they can't actually relate. So I think the inspection needs to be a standalone inspection, makes it clear what is actually being inspected and how it's going to work.
Yeah, so in terms of any potential inspection, that could be very wide-ranging. It could be very focused on a key area, or it could actually be a deep dive into an organisation. So what I'm happy to do within the context of the strategy is give some broad narrative around what an inspection entails, what the regulator's role is within that, and set out standards that the regulator has around the regulatory standards around consumers and the economic standards. So there are some quite specific comments or narrative around that, and I can certainly draw that out and summarise that within the document. Thank you.
Sorry, just on that point, can I clarify that the style of inspection that we're going to be subjected to, is that something that's going to be determined by government, or is that something for us to determine locally?
No, that is determined by the regulator.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sharif.
Thank you, Chairman. We're just going to go back to paragraph 16, if we may. Delivering effective core services that people want. Did you find out what they were? What are the core services that residents want?
Who would like to take that one?
Sorry, did you say paragraph 16 or 60?
Paragraph 16.
Is that on page 15?
It starts at the top of page 16.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of core services, so we're talking landlord functions in terms of managing tenancies, in terms of managing rent accounts, neighbourhood services, antisocial behaviour, for example. So there are a range of core services along with services that we would have to maintain someone's home. So that's repair services, servicing contracts, and managing the estate. So they're standard services that a tenant can expect once you sign a tenancy agreement with the council. So the whole range of those services, but they're broad core landlord services.
One more question, if I may. Paragraph 17, increasing the supply of affordable housing. Whilst that's obviously a great thing, what are you going to do about the infrastructure? How are we going to improve the infrastructure if we're having more houses, more people moving into Epping? What are we going to do about our already gridlocked roads?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Sharif, but I don't believe that question actually is part of this strategy.
Chairman, that's covered in great detail in the local plan, which I understand Councillor Sharif was not a member of the council when we passed that, but it would be very instructive reading because the big developments there all include an infrastructure delivery plan, which is required as part of it. And also when you go through the planning system, you will see the required infrastructure for any development that comes along. I think Councillor Whitbread also wants to say something.
Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman. And obviously, in terms of the delivery of affordable housing, we are talking about social housing, council housing, which tends to be on brownfield sites. In fact, all of the new developments which we have delivered have been on garage sites, so previously used sites. and often are actually used with right to buy receipts, so they're often replaced. So while we're driving to try and increase it, it doesn't necessarily put additional pressures on infrastructure. But I'm sure Councillor Sharif would agree that delivering affordable housing for local people, and you must have lived in Epping Forest for at least 7 years to be eligible for council housing, is very important and actually one of the core functions that this council does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whilst I agree it is important, I think looking at the infrastructure and roads and making sure that we're not always stuck in traffic jams, as constituents are constantly complaining about, is very important. May I also just say that the neighbourhood plan that Councillor Phillips mentioned, if I could have a copy of that or directed to it.
The local plan's on the website.
Right, lovely, I'll have a look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kane, I believe you've indicated. Councillor Whitbread, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just I was going to say, with all due respect, I think that's pretty irrelevant to what this report is about. It's about delivery of affordable housing for local people who have a need for reduced cost housing and how we support our tenants within that housing. And actually, sometimes some of the most vulnerable people in our district who always come first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, if I could just add to that in general the developments that we've been doing as part of the house building programme are all relatively small developments. As such, it's unreasonable to put a significant burden of infrastructure on them. That's why the local plan is there. That's why the local plan actually looks at the big areas for delivering the infrastructure, because the big developments that really have impact on things. The addition of 3 or 4 houses here or there does not have a significant impact.
Thank you very much. I want to stay on topic here, please, councillors. And the item agenda is to look at the resident involvement strategy. So if there's any other committee members that have any questions before I go to Councillor Kane. Councillor Murray.
I just wanted to make a mechanical point about how the agenda is given to us, but if you want to take Councillor Kane first, and then I'll come back to that afterwards. It's not about the actual agenda item, but it's the first time it's cropped up.
Okay. Councillor Helen Kane, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Can I go back to what originally we should be talking about, this strategy? I think that, yes, thank you very much, the officers. They have actually answered quite a lot of my questions by other members' questions. But what I would like to emphasise, and I think the members need to take in consideration about the strategy, we as councillors are actually trying to engage with our residents. So our residents come to us with their problems and their cases. And I think that it is very important that we do not lose this connection, the councillors with the officers, because the residents will feel very let down if we actually, as councillors, we say, well, no, you have to go to Ninefifth Association or whatever to help you. That is not really giving the right approach to and have the right picture to our residents. So what is happening, will be a gap, obviously, with councillors being involved with specific cases, with really serious cases, and how do you actually, with this strategy, how you see, if you do not involve any members, how do you see that this gap is going to be small?
I believe Councillor Whitbread wanted to respond to that point.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kane. And I think it's a good question because I know you're very proactive with cases in your own ward, and it is important that member engagement with residents continues. I think what this engagement strategy is more about is the panels, which residents won't sit on, but obviously you still have the right, and it's your job and your duty to take cases up for tenants, and I'd expect that usual function of a councillor to continue, and my door's always open to take any questions which are raised with officers as appropriate. Thank you.
And just to add to that point as well, I believe that as part of the training that's going to be offered to our staffing team, that councillors can also access that training as well to lead their own engagement. Is that correct? Mr. Bellew?
Yeah, and that's not to take away from the councillor sort of interface piece that we have. So we have councillor member inquiries that come through to us, and what we do have an inquiry process, and then we can track, monitor and record those responses out to councillors as well that come directly from customers. And then I think it also links back to the point that we made earlier around our opportunity to look at the terms of reference from the groups that we have, and then the reports that we can bring back to this group, or this committee, should I say, in terms of how that strategy and that engagement is actually working as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Samkane.
Thank you, Chairman. No collusion here, but I'm actually going to follow up with Helen's point. In my 8 years on district, I've seen the Ninefields Residents Panel rise and fall twice now. And on both occasions, it's been a number of things. There's been some very specific issues which have cropped up. But behind the scenes, a large part of it is the apathetic response of residents to participate in the panel's activities. What happens is you end up with 3 enthusiasts trying to do everything. The net result is, I think, going forward with this strategy, it's an important document, but forgive me, if the residents don't play ball, it's a waste of time. Yeah. So my question here is, how do we positively influence residents to actively get involved in this and to take a real part of it? And I think what will help is when you're looking at residents' panels' constitutions and their remit, if you like, is to make it very, very clear what they can and what they cannot do. There's been some very blurred lines, certainly in the Ninefields one, about where the panel's responsibilities lie, where officers' responsibilities lie, and where councillors' responsibilities lie. We found in this last iteration of the Ninefields Residents Panel, they believed that they could do it all, and they were hugely frustrated to find that they couldn't, and that was a large part of the collapse of that particular iteration of the Residents Panel. I would love to see a vibrant Residents Panel back on Ninefields. I'd love to see the Round Hills one improve over where it is at the moment. But that requires some really positive actions from the officers and direct involvement from the councillors as well. So that's just my thoughts on this whole process. Thank you.
It's a really important point, Councillor Kane. Did you want to respond to that? Did Councillor Lyon want to add to that point before I get a response? Councillor Lyon?
If I may. Yeah, from my perspective on Limes Farm, I've been engaged with them since 2006, and this group of residents group itself, the residents group, is very effective. But again, the number of people that are actually engaging has reduced. There's now one person virtually trying to do everything. But the other issue that I've got is not only the engagement with the residents group, but it's councillors' representation, because what I see is that there's councillors, there's the residents group, there's community champions, there's a proliferation of different functions that are visible and evident locally, and residents just haven't got a clue how it all fits together. My particular concern has been the relationship between the council and Qualis, but I'll raise that on the next agenda item. But also an effective single point of contact with the council. Many of the residents on Limes Farm go to the Limes office, where we don't have a representative there anymore. It used to be, if you had a problem, report them to the Limes office and they would take that forward. Yes, it's available online, but the communication channels are quite confusing. And I think that's something that does need to be looked at in terms of the strategy, engagement strategy, more a communication strategy. How do we communicate with various other social media? Are we engaging on Facebook? Are we engaging on Twitter? How do residents know who to contact and where to contact? And I think that's my biggest concern.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lyon. Mr. Ballew?
Yeah, thank you. And I think the 2 points are sort of linked in part, because I think your response gave some of the answers to the earlier question. And what I was just going to draw members' attention is to the table that we've got on page 26. That's got the different colours on that table. And I think that really goes to the heart of it, really, whereby you can have very formalised, constituted resident groups and organisations which are dependent upon residents putting a lot of time and energy and effort in, which is fine, and we can support that, help people get the training to run meetings, administrate those meetings, and then follow through those actions. But then you'll also have a lot of residents that don't either want to have that level of engagement or choose not to have that level of engagement. So looking at some of the lighter touch stuff around social media, digital surveys, maybe having champions that support very specific things, like it might be around recruitment to certain roles, or it might be around policy work. So I think it's having a range and a menu of options which will then broaden out the level at which residents can engage, and also the number. So what the plan of this strategy is to raise the overall level of engagement that we've got and the number of people who involve with the strategy. So I think that's absolutely crucial in terms of broadening that out. And then if I just probably hand over to Chris for a moment, just in relation to some of the other groups that might have, sort of come over the years and then folded, and perhaps we can just talk briefly about that, Chris.
So just to touch on Ninefields and that group, and obviously, obviously they've come and gone a few times now. I think that the group in itself, again, it's about the level of support we offer. I think there has been points where there probably could have been done, we could have done more, which again kind of relates back to this strategy and how we want to do more, how we want to bring all those different factors together, how we want to try and support those groups. And, as you've rightly said, there was some blurring of lines, if you like, in terms of where remits lie within, officers and the organisation and the council and the groups. And it's to try and ensure that those lines aren't blurred and that we give clear and concise information to people and what their expectations are and what our expectations are from the outstart of any meeting and any group kind of being formed or reformed. To touch just on Councillor Lyon's points around Limes Farm, again, it's another area where groups have come and gone and come, and luckily enough at the moment we're in a good position where the group is very strong there. But again, it does go back to that one size doesn't fit all, because we've got estate champions on that site. We also have a group. Luckily on that site they do link in together, but then we've got estate champions on other sites who don't want to be part of the residents group. They're happy doing their small part or large part, whatever they want to do. So it's just trying to respect that. I do believe that we are going to try and link that up a little bit more as part of this strategy, and how the groups and estate champions and how that all links in together. But what we don't want to do is say to people, well, if you're going to be an estate champion, you've also got to be on the group. We want to be able to let that fit the resident and their time. So thank you for those queries, and certainly again there'll be something that we'll take back to look forward to.
Thank you very much. That's really useful. If I can go to committee members first, and I'll come to you, Councillor Kane.
Just one question on that. Thank you very much for that. But all this is bring me to this question. Do we have the officers to support across the district? Because we just mentioned just a few at the moment. And what is the financial implication that will actually bring to the council? Thank you.
So at the moment there is no additional cost. The reason for that is that there's been some changes within housing that are to go live as of this coming Monday. So the estate and land team and the neighbourhoods team, as they were, have now combined into the tenancy and estates team. As part of that, the estate and land team have always been kind of big advocates of the tenancy engagement. It was something that Rachel Smith at the time bred into them and wanted to make sure that they were participating in, and that's something that we've carried forward now onto this combined team, so that those officers are all given smaller areas and patches so that they can support the tenancy engagement as well. So though we will have a couple of officers that will support the tenancy engagement solely, we will have these other officers who will be there to support the officers in evening meetings and putting the groups together and finding opportunities, because a lot of the time a lot of our group members come out of people making complaints because they care enough to complain, and then a lot of that comes and leads into them being parts of the group because actually they care enough about their areas to want to be involved.
Thank you very much. So I've got a bit of a list building up now. I've got Councillor McCann, then I'll take Councillor Brooks, and Councillor Murray, and then Councillor Lyne.
Chair, it'll be a brief point.
Okay.
As someone who's written many strategies before, I'd be remiss if I didn't also give some positive feedback. So looking at this strategy, I think you've done, the authors have done a commendable job in bringing quite a lot of complexity to bear here and actually making, drawing some real, or clarifying some of this complexity and communicating it in a very simple way, and it's very digestible, so well done. I think there's certainly a lot of work to do around, as I said earlier, around risk and around delivery, but looking at this document in itself, I think it's a commendable job and also demonstrates the Council's commitment to, as Councillor Whitbread has said, engaging with oftentimes some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. So there's a lot of innovative stuff in there, and it's just to give some positive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Councillor Brooks?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to endorse what Councillor McCann has just said, that a lot of work's gone into preparing this, so thank you to all involved. But I think one thing, and we've already exchanged brief emails about this, that does stand out for me on a survey and resident engagement really, and how we've got something to learn on this, is 57 responses online, and then 6 by post is by any stretch of the imagination a poor response. I know it was over Christmas and the post was terrible as well, as someone said. But I just feel, given, I don't know whether we're still doing this, but 3 or 4 months ago I had a conversation with Lorraine. Great work has gone into an extensive survey of our tenants. I know lots of phone calls following up. This is, to have a detailed, up-to-date database about 6,500 households approximately. And it would be good to use some of that, perhaps, the information gained, the experiences learnt from that in improving resident involvement. And also, just to reiterate what Councillor Murray said, someone who also represented the Epwood Hill estate, there's real potential there, but people will need help, I think, and a bit of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Murray?
Yeah, I've got 2 points now, Chairman, because this is scrutiny and the officers mentioned it, and it may be something that's major or something that's minor, and I apologise if I miss it, because I'm very much a single member and I can't take everything on board. But we've just been told about a relatively, well, it sounded to me, a relatively significant restructuring in housing that went live this week. And I just wondered whether we had been aware of that, had there been any scrutiny of it. I'm not saying there should have been. Was the portfolio holder involved? Was it a portfolio holder decision? To my way of hearing it, it's the first I've heard of it. I don't know what other members feel. That wasn't the point I was going to make until I heard it. So is it a significant restructuring? And is it something that there should have been some member involvement with? Or am I worrying over nothing? Or should it have been a portfolio holder decision? If we can just have a little bit more light. Because as I say, I think it's the first I've heard about it.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, just to probably just put it into context, it's not a major restructure, it's just a closer realignment of some of the housing teams and the land team. So nothing, there's no significant change, there's no staff impacted in that process either. It's a closer alignment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Did you want to come back?
You seem to keep missing my hand, Councillor Patel.
It's not deliberate, I promise.
Just to note that there was, portfolio holders don't normally get involved in the hiring and firing of staff. Obviously, there have been some changes with the management and some officers who have left, so it wouldn't be normal process for me to get involved with the hiring and hiring of managers. Thank you.
Okay, I don't want to prolong the debate, but that wasn't how it was put. It was a restructuring of a kind of department. But that's fine. I've heard what I've heard, and that's fine. I'm not happy. I have to be honest and say I'm not happy that we've made a decision to move away from paper copies for members of the committee, because I've been councillor for a long time, and I find dealing with paper copies. But I'm prepared to give it a go because I think that's reasonable, and we heard the arguments why. I mean, but can I, as this is our first committee where we haven't had paper copies, can I suggest at least one or two ways of improving things? So item 7, which is what we've been dealing with, has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate attachments. And I found it really difficult when members have said, well, they're talking about page 56. Well, which attachment is that on? So I would have thought we need one of two things. We either need the whole document for this item as one attachment. I'm not saying you can't break that document down into appendices, that's fine. But we need it as one continuous attachment, which would be a whole lot easier for members to manage. That's what I would prefer, or at the very least, I'm looking at the page, you know, the fact that I can't even tell you really what page I'm looking at, but I'm looking at the page of the agenda that has all the additional documents as PDF attachments. There aren't even page references by those attachments. So Appendix 1, I couldn't tell you what page numbers those are. Appendix 2, I couldn't tell you what page numbers. But I think the much easier way of doing it is to have one attachment, so it just reads as one, and yes, break it down into appendices, that's fine, but just have one attachment, and it would be so much easier for members. You know, half the time when members were referring to pages, I couldn't get there quick enough because I didn't know which attachment. So I just think we need to do that. It would be so much easier for members.
Councillor Kane, I think you wanted to respond.
Yeah, thank you. Forgive me, Councillor Murray, it is probably just a question of training on the use of mod.gov. You can access the list of appendices from within mod.gov and jump straight to them. Happy to show you afterwards.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lyon.
Just a very simple question. I wanted just to hear from Mr. Walsh. Did you say an estate champion? Oh, I didn't know we had those as well. So is that different to a community champion and a digital champion and any other champions that we might have?
Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, so no, they are different. We do like a champion. And, you know, I would say that actually the estate champion, as I said, is actually on the residents group as well. A lady who you were actually at the opening with the other day. So, yeah, we do have estate champions and lots of different means and ways. So we do try to make sure that everybody's involved in whichever capacity they like. But, yeah, there is an estate champion there.
Can I just come back, because I think this again is a confusion, because each department seems to have different champions. I mean, we've got Wendy Cockbill, she's got community champions, we've got housing with estate champions. Can we pull it together and tell residents a one single point of contact champion?
Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, I think within the glossary there is a breakdown of the actual descriptions for each of the champions, and certainly the block street or the estate champion is described as a new role that we're now putting into the strategy itself. But again, I think as we work through the strategy and see the response that we get to these, there may be some sort of evolving of these roles over time, and we can review those as we move through. But it was about trying to create more variety and more opportunities for more people to engage. Depending on their interests. Thank you.
Councillor Lyon.
I understand that, but all I'm saying is you've got an estate champion, there's community champions. Can we, across the business, look at these things to see whether we can pull this together so we don't have multiple contacts?
Mrs. Gould.
Yeah, I think what's important to, I mean, you're right, we have got a number of different champions, but they all perform different functions and they all bring different skills. So the digital champions will be very different to the community champions, who will again be very different to the estate champions. And actually, it's not about having sort of one point of contact and one front door. It's about having multiple front doors into the organisation where we can listen to a diversity of voices who all bring a different perspective and a different set of skills. However, I'd absolutely take your point about we haven't pulled those opportunities together in one visual place so that residents know how they can get involved and get their voices heard in the variety of different roles that we've got. So I will absolutely take that point, and we'll look at doing something around that.
So, do we have any other committee members, other members of council? So I have a few questions which I wanted to ask. Just for knowledge, how many tenants, leaseholders do we have across how many properties within the district?
So across the districts, we've got 6,500 and I think it's 54 now with some of the additional new builds. That's kind of roughly broken down to around about 6,000 residents and 400 odd leaseholders across the district. So for that, again, obviously that's broken down for the teams, for instance, who are dealing with that. That'll be broken down into geographical patch areas of around about 500.
Thank you very much. Next question. How will the effectiveness of the strategy be assessed? Are we, what is the baseline KPI that we're going to be measuring against?
Oh, sorry. So I think there's probably a whole multifaceted approach there. A is around the level of engagement that we have firstly, to see does it raise the number of people engaging with us across those different ways? Looking at the involvement that we have across the constituted groups as well, in terms of the objectives through those groups. And then it's also in terms of the work plan that we have set up through the groups as well, in terms of the key areas that they want to look at and the level of involvement that we get. Sitting alongside that will then be the level of satisfaction that we have in terms of the level of engagement and our broader services as well. So I think there is still there's still some work to be done on measures of the strategy. So I think this is going to be some work in progress as part of that delivery plan as well that Councillor McCann mentioned earlier on. So if we commit to X number of these and X number of those, have we delivered those, and what was the actual output of those, and then measuring that from residents themselves. Did they find that meaningful? Was it of value to them? And what improvement and feedback do we then get into our services to improve those services, and then see how that plays through our sort of headline metrics as we go through the year as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in terms of the 22 questions that are going to be asked through the tenant satisfaction, just in terms of the measures, the tenant satisfaction measures, when are we going to start engaging, and at what point are we going to start generating some feedback that we could come back to this committee and then update members on?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Just on that, so we're currently engaged with an organisation that specialises in surveys. So we've done some soft market testing already. So there's 3 potential providers. It looks like there is one front runner at the moment. We're looking to have our survey provider organised and agreed by the middle of August, with a view to getting our first survey out to residents probably mid to late September of this calendar year. So the approach is going to be to have 2 surveys done. So one, sort of like I said, in September of this year, and then the next survey we will have around sort of late February, early March of next year. So our obligation under the regulatory standards is to have our survey completed in this financial year, and for survey results to then be reported back to the regulator in April 2024. But from the earlier item that we had around the work plan, you'll notice on there was a report due back from myself in March of next year. So certainly I would look to bring back the survey results, certainly after the September results, but also before we submit our annual results, those survey results will come back to this committee as well. So some work certainly to be done, a lot of work, and in fact Chris is leading on that particular project for us at Epping, and we should have a fairly detailed comms plan and briefing that we'll be able to share with members fairly soon. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you for that. And just finally, in terms of resource implications, in the report on paragraph 95, you say for effective involvement, you're going to be providing grants to residents associations. And then we'll talk about new roles under paragraph 97. So these new roles, I'm presuming, are existing positions, or are they positions that you're recruiting to? And under paragraph 102, you're saying that there's going to be dedicated financial resource and equipment to support resident involvement activities. Is this all falling within the HRA budget? And this money has already been allocated?
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, it falls within our current budgets that we've had in place. As I said, the kind of merger and move around of some of the teams has enabled us to kind of better resource the need around this particular strategy. So there is no additional cost to what we already have. We've got quite robust budgets to cover the funding of the groups and any additional groups that we take on. And you know, we're kind of midpoint now of the financial year, and we're very much on point in terms of our spending on that as well. So there will be no additional costs.
Thank you very much. So, members, in recommending this draft resident involvement strategy to Cabinet, it's essential that residents are being placed at the heart of decision making. Are we satisfied that that's the case, and happy to recommend this report? Or strategy, rather. Sorry. Yes. Brilliant, thank you very much. So next item on the agenda is dates of future meetings, and it's to note that the next meeting of the Community Select Committee, Scrutiny Committee will be held on the 26th of September at 7 p.m. Item number 9 is exclusion of public and press. Should be excluded from the meeting for the items of business set out below on grounds that they will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the following paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as amended, or are confidential under Section 100 brackets A brackets 2. So agenda item number 10, which is the housing repairs value for money,